Hello, Joshua here. Welcome to the video. In this video, we'll be learning about the SWR library. It is a library that helps you make calls to APIs and endpoints in a cleaner way in your React applications while also handling things like caching and revalidation. To get started, we just need a React application. For this example, I'm using a Next.js application, but you can use whichever React application that you have. Next, we want to install the SWR library. So I'm just going to run npm I SWR. And once you have that installed, we'll get started using it. So in my app folder, I'm just going to open the root page folder. And in here, I'm going to make use of the SWR library. Now, to make use of the SWR library, you want to import use SWR from SWR. To make use of SWR, you just have to call the use SWR hook. And in here, we are going to pass in an endpoint that we're calling, as well as an async function, which we use to make the async calls. Now, your fetcher here could be, well, anything that returns a promise, including just your fetch calls. For now, I'm going to be using a fetch call, which is just going to be, well, it's a function that calls fetch, passing that receives what the arguments that go into the fetch parameters, and then just tries to convert that into a JSON and gets that returned. For the purpose of this video, I'll be making use of the JSON placeholder service. It just gives you mock APIs where you can get sample data that you can use when just testing things out. There are a couple of endpoints here, and I'm just going to be calling well, a few of this. And one I'll be starting with is the users endpoint, where I can get a specific user. So if I should copy on this link, this will be the link I'll be calling in my useSWR hook right here. So if I want to get just one user, I just want to say /1 to get well, one user. And what this does is use SWR is going to call my fetcher function with the argument, and that argument gets called into the fetch. So I'll effectively be doing a fetch call. Now use SWR returns an object with a couple of properties we'll be interested in. So I could get make a constant, and then I will just destructure the object. The main ones we'll be interested in is one is if it's loaded. We're interested in the data. We're interested in, well, if there's any error with my function call, and if it is loading. Now this is the default Next.js view. I'm going to clean this up a bit, but for now, I'm just going to have a block in here. So right here, I'll say if it's loading, I'm just going to return, well, a text that says loading. But if we aren't loading, just right here, I can print out a h1 tab where I can get data dot. Now, data in this circumstance is going to be what was returned from this endpoint, which is just my user. So I just want to get the user's name. We can save that. All right, so now I would want to run my Next.js project with npm run dev. Remember, whatever setup you have to use, which you have to start the project. Now this is running. Let's go see what this looks like in the browser. Now I'm in the browser, and yeah, not what you expect, but I'm getting an error, and the reason for this is useSWR is a hook, and for Next.js projects, to make use of a hook, it has to be, well, hooks only work in a client component. So I just need to go back to my code in here, and at the top have use client. If you are not using Next.js, you probably wouldn't see this issue. Okay, with that done, come back, and yeah, I'm here in my project, and we can see that name is being rendered out here. If I refresh again, you see briefly, like the network is so good, but if you look in here, briefly there was the loading screen, loading text, and then we have this being loaded. Now, understand that what this is effectively doing is replacing the need to have a useEffect hook and then a useState hook to be able to fetch and also manage this data, because that is being done for you by the useSWR hook. And there's also an error state in case there is an error that happens. So for instance, I could also have like, if error, we can have like error loading data, and I can try this out by using a wrong endpoint here. And if I go in here, you can see we have that error loading data. Let's restore that back. One thing I want to do is to have multiple components. I'm just going to quickly create 2 new components in my project. Now in my project, I've added this 2 new components, profile and heading. And what I want to do is I want to display this user's data in both these components, which I'm going to be importing right here. Now, we can see this is a plain component. Now, normally, what in cases like this where you have the same data that you want to display in multiple places and you're making a HTTP call, is you'd want to make the call in a maybe parent component and then pass that data down into each of those components, because you wouldn't want to make multiple calls for the same data. Well, because of how use SWR works and its caching strategy, that might not be necessary, and you don't have to like start passing props down multiple children. So what we can do here is I'm going to take over this call, and I'm putting it into this component, and I'm going to do the same thing for the other component. All right, and after doing that, for the heading component, I just want to print out a simple heading, which just says hello, then the name that is retrieved from this API. Okay, and if you also notice, there's this we still need the fetcher function, but because I'm going to use it in these 2 places, I think I'm going to create a util file. So we can get this out here and just create a new file. Just call it fetcher.ts, and let's just export that. All right, and then we can easily get that imported over here. So import, okay, from fetcher. All right, so we have this here. Then we basically do the same thing for the profile component. But in the profile component, I want to like show a bit more details, like the name, username, and a couple of other things. All right. Now, what I want to do is to go to my page components, and I think I no longer need this right here. And note, because I'm no longer making use of useSWR, this doesn't need to be a client component anymore. But I need to bring that to this other components, because they need to be client components to be able to use SWR. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is that right in here, I do want to make a call to, or rather I want to bring in my heading component. And well, maybe underneath it, I also want to add the, okay, so, oh, yeah, I need to export this. All right, so once that is exported, we can get the heading imported. We can also get profile imported, get rid of that, and I think the image as well. Okay, so we have both the heading and profile. So in here, I'm also going to get rid of some of the boilerplate code that came with my Next.js project, as well as the heading and this. All right, so we just have the new things that I have. Okay, and let's save. All right, so once this is saved and we have this SWR calls here, basically what we had there but duplicated. Now, if I get into my code, we can see the heading from the heading component, and then we can also see the profile from the profile component down here. These are two components having different SWR calls. But if I do inspect and you want to go to the network tab with me, you'll notice that right here in the fetch calls, now I'm going to reload. Notice we are only making one call. We aren't making two calls, even though we are calling the endpoint twice. The reason for this is that use SWR caches one of those calls since they have the same key. And since they have the same key, it will always make it once. So effectively, you can take the SWR call to multiple components and only get to hit your endpoint once. And if you're wondering what the key is basically what you pass into the string here. In this case, it is the API URL that is being used as the key by SWR, and that will avoid duplication, provided you don't make any changes to this key. Now, to take SWR a bit further, I'm going to create a new component. I've created this post component, and it's similar to the other two components. The only difference is now we are calling the post endpoint in JSON placeholder, and we are rendering a bit different because we want to render just the title of each of the posts. So I would want to import this component into here. So we can put that like right over here. I'm just going to use the HR, and then I'll want to render my posts right underneath here. Let's get that imported. All right, so if I should save this and return, we can see that we have, well, all the posts. We have the heading, the profile, and then we have, well, about 100 posts in here. But we can see that we are able to get that data from using SWR. However, what if I don't want to get like all the 100 posts? I want to get just the first five, maybe just the latest post. Okay, and latest post, not all posts. Well, one way you can easily say you do that is in a post component. I could do a slice after retrieving, which is fine. But just say I want to use that latest post in different places. I don't want to have to keep performing that operation, or and I do want SWR to cache the results. Now, note the fetcher function here is basically a function that returns a promise, and any function that returns a promise can go into here. It doesn't have to be like the fetch function in JavaScript. So one thing we can do here is I'm going to create a custom function called so let's just go create const, let's call it latest post, and it's going to be an async function. And I don't need any URLs params for now. And what's going to happen is in here we are going to make a call to the post API, and then we're going to get the all the posts from we're going to get all the posts from the JSON data that was returned, and then from this we can get maybe, let's say, the latest five, and let's just return that. So the first five will be treated as our latest posts, and that is returned from this async function. We can do some error handling here and all, or maybe throwing some errors if unable to the structure, but I'm not focusing on that here. The next thing you want to do is you would want to make this latest post function now to be our fetcher. And since we're not really making an API call and we're not using any arguments, because what happens is SWR would pass this as an argument to the function you pass in, but we don't need that argument. However, we still need the key. So what I can do is I can just use latest post as the key as well, even though I don't really need it as a parameter. So what happens is this: should I save this and return back to what we viewed? We can see now that we're only getting, well, the top five. I think that's one, two, three, four, five. All right, we're getting the top five posts there. But now we are making use of a custom function that has further operations to be able to get that. And again, remember, if you do take this function to a different part of your code using this same key, latest post, we're only going to make this call once. Something you might notice or not yet is if I do switch focus maybe to my editor or something and I come back to the browser, notice there was an additional call just being made now to both endpoints. Can do that again. And you see there's another being made. And now this is just how SWR works. It tries to get the latest data for you. It's constantly pulling on your server to make sure it's able to pull fresh data in case any of this has changed. And understand in there are cases where you might not want that. And SWR makes provision for that because it is totally configurable. So if we get back to our code, SWR here, the first is the key, second is the fetcher function, and thirdly we can have configurations that we pass in here. And so one of those configurations you can do is revalidate on focus. So what this means is, well, if I should go away from the window and come back, do you want to fetch that data again? Now, if I should say no to this, well, it doesn't fetch it on focus. Similar to this, there's another called revalidate on reconnect. Okay, you can set that to false if you want. And if you do look at the function, there are a couple of other configurations that you can set. I'm not going through all this now, but you get the point. So with this being set in place now, going back here, if I should refresh this, you see we have our regular calls. If I should lose focus and come back here, notice now only the endpoint to the user's endpoint was called, but the post endpoint wasn't called again because we've set revalidate on focus to false, and that might be something that you might want to do. Now, in cases where okay, you looked at it and you're like, okay, I think this should be the default. I do not want to have to set this consistently for each time I'm going to use SWR. Well, SWR has an SWR config provider where you can pass the default functions that you want for each of your SWR calls. The way you use it as a, well, how you use the provider, you wrap all your child components with it. And for your setup or your application, you have to find a reasonable place close to the parent of your application to wrap all child components. But for me, in my case, I'm just going to do that in the layout component. So in my root layout component here, I want to make use of that SWR config object. So that would come from the SWR package. So I want to import SWR config from SWR. I'm just going to use it to wrap all the children of my component of my project. So in here, I'm just going to have SWR config and get the children in here. And in there, the prop you want to pass is the value prop. And in the value prop, you can then pass in the configs that you want to pass in. And one of such values that you can pass in is basically, well, what we had here: revalidate on focus, validate on reconnect, or any other of those options. I can pass those in here. In fact, I can pass a custom fetcher function, which then I can specify what should be the default to be used for fetch. So I might not even need to pass a fetcher in my future SWR calls, but I'm just not going to do that right now. If we should save this, and if I should go back to my project and make a refresh, notice we have only one call. If I go out and focus back in, notice none made any other call because the default is now it's no longer revalidating on focus. There are a couple of other configs that you can set globally here. even a fallback data for your SWR components, because this is a Next.js project and that I use, and if you I would can show you the source, you would see that because this data is coming from the client, there's really no SSR support. But using this config, there's a way to pass data that will kind of like support your SSR data. I'm not going to be doing that in this video, though, but you can subscribe. And if you found this video helpful, please do like it as well. And watch out, I'll probably do a future video where I show you how you can pass data to this, your SWR components, so that they're kind of like SSR compliant. But I really hope you found this video useful, making your calls a whole lot leaner using SWR rather than using multiple hooks to fetch your data. And let me know if you found this helpful. Let me know if you use this in your project or if you've already been using this in your project. I would really love to hear from you. But until next time, thanks for watching this video. I'll see you in the next one.